back to Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. So good to have you with us. The website, TonyPerkins.com. Again, let me remind you, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Pray Vote Stand, live broadcast on the eve of thousands of Americans joining here in our nation's capital. All right, hundreds of state legislators in battleground states have been briefed by a six-person team from the nonprofit organization Got Freedom on the greatly contested election results from November the 3rd. Now, we've talked about this in some detail, how really the system was gamed. And joining me now to talk about this is Phill Kline, the director of the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society, former Attorney General for the state of Kansas. Phill, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Good to be with you.
All right, Phill, let's talk about this very quickly. I want you to jump right into this, but what have you been sharing with these lawmakers in this briefing about what you have been tracking now for over a year in terms of what the left has been doing in these private-public partnerships that have gamed the system?
Yes, they have. What they've done, Tony, is leftist executive officials have given sensitive private information of citizens over to leftist nonprofits who in return have provided hundreds of millions of dollars directly to county and city election officials, dictating how they are going to manage the election. And most of that funding came directly from Mark Zuckerberg, over $400 million, which is more than the federal government appropriated for elections during COVID back in March of 2020 in the CARES Act. So we had a shadow government managing these elections, particularly in the urban core, and they set up these procedures that allowed for the breach of the chain of custody of the ballots and the infusion of fraudulent ballots.
Now, when I first saw this, I read the first report I read of this, I said, wait a minute, you can't do that. That's illegal. But in fact, the giving of money to these government entities is not illegal, as I understand it.
Well, it's not a crime, but we believe it violates the Help America Vote Act and federal law. Federal law is focused on treating every voter equally, and states cannot receive those funds unless the state gets an approved election plan, which requires that the funds be expended so that everybody has an equal opportunity to vote. That makes sense. But what these cities did is they, on their own, created their own plans contrary to the state plan. And we believe that's a violation of the law. Now, in fact, I know it is. Now, whether anybody will recognize that in what is becoming, and you've spoken of this often, Tony, I know, a lawless culture because of the deconstruction of truth. I mean, in this election year, for example, in Michigan, they kicked Republicans. They created a consolidated counting center the size of 2 football fields. And the law says that a Republican and a Democrat must be in the place of the counting. Well, you see, prior to this year, that meant a small table where everybody could see that the counting was being done correctly and ballots were being held properly. Well, what the Democrats argued is now we've got this building the size of 2 football fields. We're going to put the Republican in the cheap seats where they can't see what's going on. And we have complied with the law. This deconstruction of language and removal of the purpose of the law defeats the law and results in lawlessness. And that's what we're seeing in America today, is lawlessness.
And of course, the coronavirus provided a great smokescreen for all of us. Not saying the virus isn't real, but it was very convenient for them to use to manipulate these systems under the guise of trying to
you bet. Now think about this. They said COVID required us to take these counting rooms that used to occur in wards. And it was about a room the size of the room I'm in now, where everybody could see what was going on. There'd be 8 people or so counting ballots and looking over what's going on. And COVID required them to create a crowd in the urban core. Right. But what that creation allowed is the infusion of and drop of hundreds of thousands of ballots at one location, and also to kick America out of the counting room.
But there was more. But there was more in this with these grants that were given, this money, this partnership. For instance, as I understand it, is what I read, for instance, in Philadelphia, where they were actually able to hire workers who went out and knocked on the doors of certain precincts, handing the ballots and then taking the ballots back and collecting them. It was like paid ballot harvesting.
Yes, they did. And they deputized activists to do it. And in the grant, Tony, they actually mandate a private entity. This is like elections brought to you by Coca-Cola or the National Rifle Association. Except it's Mark Zuckerberg. They demanded Philadelphia have 800 locations for people to vote in that Democrat stronghold. And if they didn't, they would take back all their millions of dollars.
And that's the
Zuckerberg
two-tier
ran
system.
this election.
That's the two-tier system. It was only for certain precincts where they got the vote result that they wanted, correct?
Absolutely. Another example of that is Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which receives Zuckerberg money. They put one drop box. It's a Democrat stronghold, one drop box for every 4 square miles. That's 2 miles by 2 miles square. You could go out on a stroll and vote. In the 59 counties that President Trump won in Pennsylvania, there was one drop box for every 1,159 square miles.
All right, we're out of time here, but this is a topic we're not going to move away from. Let me just ask you this very quickly. Is there a remedy?
We're trying. It's the state legislatures. They need to vote to decertify.
All right, we're going to talk more about this. Phill Kline, thanks so much for joining us. As always, great to talk with you. Thank you for the great work you do.
Thank you, sir.
All right, folks, don't go away, because on the other side of the break, Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas is going to join us to talk about the effort he undertook to give the vice president the authority to reject these tainted slates of electors. We're also going to talk about the opening prayer in the House of Representatives. What's going on up there? It's disturbing, to say the least. That's next here on Washington Watch. Don't go away. More to come.